Welcome, my friends, to Paranormal Heart Podcast. Tonight's segment is pre recorded, streaming on United Public Radio Network 107.7 New Orleans. I'm your host, Kat Ward. Thank you so much for tuning in. So, my special guest tonight is no stranger to the show and really needs no introduction. She's an avid researcher of pretty much anything in the paranormal. Michelle Desrochers, tonight we'll be discussing my favorite topic, Loup Garou, Dogman, anything pretty much lichen. So, welcome, Michelle.
Hello, hello, hello. I think you and I share a similar interest in all of this.
Oh, yes, for sure. And I didn't realize until I was talking with you that there were so many of these encounters in Canada.
I know. I don't think people realize that this is like I'm sure they do, a worldwide thing. But if you look at Canada, we just seem so benign. It's
Yeah, exactly.
so many levels. But our history with this sort of stuff goes like way, way back. I mean, the Indigenous people started documenting things going back into the 16 and 1700s. And here we call it Loup Garou.
Yep.
The southern U.S. is Loup Garou. In Europe, obviously it's werewolves. And I mean, now Dogman seems to be a new, something that's come up in the last probably few decades or couple of decades. And it reminds me of a story. When I was in Romania, I was in a town called Brasov. And Brasov is very Germanic as well. I mean, during the World War II, they sort of settled in and around the area of Romania. But there's a huge courtyard there that you can get to the Black Church from. And the lore there is, if you come down on the night of a full moon, you could see the wolves will come down. And I'm like, wolves? And they're like, oh, wolves. Like, there's stories of the wolves, full moon, the werewolves. And it's just like, I wish I could have been there. I was at the haunted forest. So I was making my way over. It was a toss up. Which one did I want to experience? But I was very, very torn, But these are old world legends that go back, thousands of years if you're starting in Europe. And as people, migrated or immigrated over here to the New World, they took a lot of that with them. So it's not uncommon to hear about werewolf or legends or Loup Garou. So when the French came here, it said that they actually they were at war with these things in France. Like there was a whole lot of issues with them. So usually you come here and you bring a lot of that with you. But here we already had what were called these Loup Garou, and the Indigenous spoke of them all settling. They were all over from one end of the country to the other, all around the Great Lakes, which of course would have brought them into the northern United States. And then, of course, we had a lot of, people coming over at that time, even before here, at least as far as, being a country goes, the 1500s and such. So a lot of this just became, I guess, part of local folklore. And they were very different to the Indigenous. They weren't considered, here in Canada, they were not considered skinwalkers or traditional werewolves that could just change, people who could change, let's say, on the full moon. Loup Garou was supposed to be able to change multiple times. Yep. And some of them were actually just wolves that walked upright. They were not people at all.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of freaky when you think about it. But, they range all over the place. And they're even today, when we hear about in the 1800s that we're having experiences in northern Michigan, well, we know right now, to this day, there are still sightings of the Michigan Dogman.
Yep.
So this goes on and on for forever. But we'll break down, some areas. In Ontario, I find it very interesting. A story that had come in came from a town called Port Robinson that is near Niagara Falls. It is called the Port Robinson Beast. So I'm going to read it off because this was pretty much how the story was told. And there's not a lot to be found in and around this. I have tried to research this. There's local stories of local people. And what happened was when they put in the Welland Canal, which is massive, and you have to go through the canal to get from Lake Ontario, you go up about 450 feet to get you over to Lake Erie. and then you keep going to, Lake Huron, and Lake Superior has a very small area, I think, a lock. But yeah, you're climbing. Think of
Mhm.
Niagara Falls from Lake Ontario. For anyone who's, you're going up that high. So they split the town of Port Robinson in half. So now where people could just kind of go back and forth, they have to go all the way around now. It's the real
Oh, wow.
different setup. And when they did this, strange things started happening. I mean, there've been other phantom stories and things like that. Probably, people who are building the locks. There's a lot of haunted stories,
Mhm.
but there's one about the Port Robinson beast, and it's only local tales. So how it was told, he was at I don't want to say the name of the company, but anyway, he was at an establishment. He was for work,
Mhm.
and this girl who knew him from being a regular, they just got talking about things because, Wayne and I have been, obviously, he's filmed with me a few times and he's an author in his own right. And
Mhm.
people sort of figure out who he is. So they always feel compelled to tell us the strange tales. So she said one night she and a friend of hers, a girlfriend, were out for the evening. And on the way home, they stopped near an old abandoned house. Everybody's got that old abandoned house somewhere in
Yeah.
the neighborhood, right? The local haunted house. And right, a lot of the teenagers would dare each other to go inside and see how long they could remain within the house. So while these women were in their car near the house, they said a young man bolted from the house, bolted from the property, ran across the road, and then they lost sight of him. So they started having these giggles, going, "Oh well, there's another one who lost his nerve," that sort of thing. But then all of a sudden, they noticed this very large, dark-colored animal, this big shape, lurking around the same house. So she said it was huge. At the time, it was on all fours. It looked like a big, hairy dog. But she goes, but it was too large to be domestic dog. And I can relate to that. Anyway, they both started to feel uneasy. So they decided to drive off. They passed the house. And the woman's friend, who was a passenger, looked back. And the animal, who was partially hidden in the overgrowth, appeared to stand up.
That's creepy.
Right? Oh, it gets better. It gets better. So she freaked out and told her friend, like, book it.
Yeah.
Let's get out of here. This is crazy. So they sped off and they got onto a secondary road away from that neighborhood. And at that point, she said they were traveling around 60 or 70 kilometers an hour. I'm not quite sure what that is in miles, probably more. But anyway, yeah, because 90 is like 55 miles an hour. So we're not like far off. But she said it was getting dark. And even though they were traveling pretty quick at this point, the passenger suddenly screamed that this beast was running along the car, but upright. It was pacing the car, and it slammed its hand or front limb against the door of the car before the driver took off and really booked it. So they raced for home. They pulled into the driveway, ran into the house, locked the door, the whole 9 yards. The next morning, the driver looked at the car and found scratches on the paint of the passenger door. And the mirror was sort of just kind of like broken off and hanging there. And but it was still attached. Now,
Wow.
if people will tell you that sometimes if a dog man picks up your scent, that it could essentially find you, like
Yep.
most canines, right?
Mhm.
So I'm just like, that's a little too close for comfort because Port Robinson is like literally about, I don't know, 20 minutes,
That's
30
not
minutes
far.
from here. I know, I know. And there are so many stories within Niagara Falls that go back probably at least to the 60s where people have documented seeing things like that. I know at the manor, a lot of people would catch things because it's right along the river, but it's
Mhm.
pretty populated. Wayne said one night he was sitting outside and he was just on his computer on his laptop. He was writing and he looked up, and running down the road in front of the house, what he goes, whatever it was, it seemed to be loping. It didn't run like a normal dog or an
Yep.
animal. It loped, and it was really long and lanky, and it had this really long nose. He said, he goes, you get some coyotes that look kind of mangy. He
Yep.
said, but it was 3 times the size of a coyote. And at least, like, it was huge, this thing. And it is what it is, you know. And we had somebody else who was in the area as well, who said they saw something look like it was running like a dog. And he came to a stop sign, not far from the manor. And then all of a sudden, he looked, it's like, where did it go? He goes, there's no way it could have gotten out of sight, because he was just coming onto that stop sign, and this
Mhm.
thing crossed the road. And then, you know, all of a sudden, it's like, it looked like a man, right, just crossing the road,
Yep.
disappeared behind, we're talking a street light. They're not very wide. And a big dog came running out from behind that street light afterwards, across the road.
And no
So,
trace of the man.
well, no, he just kind of sat
Yeah.
there, backed up and went, yeah, I'm good. I'm just going to go down this other road because I think it's just going to be safer. But through the years, I've had people tell me stories, and the stories come up twice, in a town called Elmira. And Elmira is a place that we call it, like, the old Pioneer Highway that just kind of goes towards, you know, heading into the north a little bit.
Mhm.
Um, so for people who don't know Canada, it heads towards a place, you know, within Guelph, and Acton has had many sightings as well. And I had a woman come up to me one time, and she said, when I was young, my grandmother, they had a farm. My grandparents had a farm out in Elmira, and they always said, you know, you want to play, that's fine. Just don't go near the woods. That's where the wolf people live. And she's like, okay, you know, she goes, I'm a little kid. I didn't question it. But then I became a teenager, and I was about 16 years old. And I'm walking across the field, and I'm like, I'm just going to walk to the edge of the forest, because it had been conditioned into me for so many years. Because
Yep.
I'm just doing it. I'm going to walk down along the edge of the forest. So she says, I made it halfway, because we're talking, you know, like a few acres, right? And I
Mhm.
just spent like a couple of hours, and I just started walking and walking. And all of a sudden, I could see along the tree line, there were 5 what looked like very large dogs walking upright along that tree line.
Oh, wow.
And that story came to me again a few years later.
By someone else?
Yes,
Wow.
along seeing not this property,
Mhm.
but seeing, you know, these wolves that walked upright in a different part of another forest, but in the exact same area.
Now telling me that as a child, "Don't go there because there's wolf people," that would have heightened
Okay.
my
Yeah.
because 'cause I'm very curious, even as a child. I probably would have been like, "Okay, I wanna go see."
Yes, exactly.
It wouldn't have deterred me, but
No,
wow.
I know. I'm the same way. I grew up north. I grew
Mhm,
up, you know, in Northern Ontario, Canada, and I was very accustomed to having wolves in the back part of our property, timber wolves. And to give you an idea between the size of a wolf, you know, regular, let's say black wolf or gray wolf,
mhm,
and a timber wolf, picture yourself in an F4, like, or like an F-150, a big pickup truck.
mhm.
Because my father would say, "Oh, yeah," you know, they would go, you know, hunting or fishing, things like that. And, one time he said we were coming through a trail in the woods in a truck. It's a big truck, and they came upon a timber wolf. It walked towards the front of the truck, and it could literally see inside over the hood of the truck and see into the cab. That's a pretty high up. That's a pretty
It's
big animal.
intimidating.
You know? Yeah, they just, you know, we just became accustomed to, like, wolves didn't really bother us at all, like, they didn't go out of their way to bother you. I
Mhm.
remember being, you know, like 9 or 10, sitting up on the top of a ridge, a mountain, you know, just over the house. Back then, you could go in, pick blueberries, do whatever, and on the
Yep.
neighboring mountain, which was just a very small valley between us, I was just sitting there eating an apple, and there was, like, a wolf just sitting there watching me, you know. You know, I've been taught, just don't make eye contact if you can,
Mhm.
and I never did. I just sort of looked down, and I was still able to get up and walk away, you know. And I just sort of threw, you know, the other half of the apple, and he went and investigated it after I
Oh,
walked away,
wow.
probably took off with it. I
Mhm.
think I was more worried about the bears than the wolves. But the point is I am no stranger to being
To
around
wolves.
around wolves,
Yeah.
so they didn't freak us out. We'd hear them at night, and I enjoyed listening to them,
Mhm.
so it is what it is. But there have been so many stories, and the fact that they've whatever it is has come south, or maybe never left, really. But I mean, they're all over Canada. The northern parts of Canada. These things have been spotted all over northern part of the United States, throughout the United States, throughout the world. I think we just have different perceptions, or they just seem to be a little bit different. So I have had, stories where a street not far from me, I had again somebody report they were just driving down this area. There's a very large cemetery to the left of this street, just huge, but the botanical gardens were on the other side. So this is West Burlington, and there were two wolves at first that they said that looked like two really, really big dogs. He goes, but then all of a sudden they stopped, stood upright, and crossed the road. They didn't cross on all fours. So it's kind of like, all right, that's interesting, you
Yeah.
know. And then one of my sons actually said his friend and his father were driving down literally beside our place because we're surrounded by a ravine. And they were driving along and basically slowed down because they were on a bend, and there's a really large, dog type being there, and it sort of stopped and looked like it was about ready to haunch up, but didn't. So you're kind of like, okay, you don't think much about that. And then my daughter tells me, really not that long ago, she goes, oh, I remember looking out in the backyard one time, and I'm going to show a picture of the back part of the property at one point, like part of the property. It was a big property. And she said there was something really big, like really like tall, that just looked right out, like at me. It knew I was there, and it looked at me, and it had these sort of glowing red eyes. She goes, but that could have just been the light hitting it, or
Yeah.
because we had we obviously had security lights in the back. She said, beyond that, I could not get, it was dark. I could not get a really close look. She goes, but it really flipped me out. I'm just like,
And she never told you that before now, like.
No, she said she would see things in and around there, but she was a bit more specific in later years. I'm like, I would like to have known that.
Yeah.
You know, um, so I'm like, okay, well, it's not a coyote, obviously. They're just short, lanky, and to me, they always remind me of like hyenas or something. They whine.
Yeah, yeah.
Coyotes freaking whine. So my other son had a group of people over one time because we had a big pool, big property, a very private, very private property, and he goes, we're hearing growling. I'm like, oh, it's got to be a stupid coyote. But they don't technically or typically do that. They kind of yip, 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 And with all the lights we had, we just turn on these power security lights, and it goes, and you hear them, and then they run.
Yeah.
So I said, just turn on all the security lights. Nothing happened. Like there was no yipping, and habitually they yip if they got too close. And we have had Malamutes and Siberian Huskies, and they were out with the kids. If there was anything out there, they would smell the dogs. They would not come that close to the property. So he said, this is crazy. There's growling. I'm just like, okay. So I actually put out like a baby monitor because I wanted to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody went home. So for 2 nights in a row, I just put out a baby monitor. I'm just like, I'm just going to see what's going on. This is craziness. Like we've not had this before that I knew of.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden there was some pretty deep growls. I'm going, can't be a bear, could be a dog, but then our dog sort of went crazy.
Yep.
Right. I didn't put, by the way, I'm just saying, I didn't put the baby one next to our dogs. So, they were in another area of the property, but our dogs, I imagine, would have picked up the scent and
Definitely.
alerted us like they did every other time.
Mm-hmm.
Right. They had like a 600 or 700, 800 square foot run with a huge building that they used to stay in, right? Not like it's not like a doghouse. This is probably like an 800 again square foot building that
Mhm.
was heated and everything else for them to come in and out of. But they spent it. Huskies love it outside.
They do. Yeah.
So, and this was summertime. So anyway, whatever it was, there were some pretty low growls coming in. And I'm just like, that made me nervous. I'm just like, I don't really think I like that. Like we were mostly fenced, but there was still a part of the property that was not fenced. Right.
Mm.
So anyway, and then it brings to, my experience one day when I was sitting in the backyard. I'm going to show some pictures if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, so 1 second here. Let me just pull up some pictures. I want to give people an idea of the part of the backyard, what it looked like. Okay, 1 second. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Pretty sure I had it out here. Let me look. As I'm being pinged to death over here. Okay, 1 second. Okay. All right, here it is. So this is, I just want people to have an idea. This is what the place looked like. And when I was standing we had a kitchen with a really big window so I could see clear out. And this happened, it was probably March at that point of, I'll say 2019. Okay, this is part of the backyard. Okay, so yeah, we removed a pool here. So it was turned into, like, in the spring, we had big concrete benches that came out and tables because, everybody's grown up. Nobody wants to take care of the pool. Nobody wants to use the pool.
Yeah.
Oh, we just got rid of the pool. But way back in here, and I'll show you right along the edge, right behind that fence,
Mhm.
our property probably, it went pretty far, but let's say right in and around right here. Okay. Is when essentially out of nowhere in the middle of the day, this dog type animal, well, this dog, I've had, like I said, I had Malamutes in the past. I've had Huskies. I know how big and these type of dogs get.
Mhm.
And I saw a dog and it was massive. Like I was washing my lunch dishes. So again, I always leave my phone in the den on the table and then I come in and, just wash a few things. So we had an island that looked outward. And this animal is chasing a rabbit. The rabbit is obviously being chased. It goes in under one of our outbuildings. And this freaking thing comes in and I looked at it. I'm going, that's a big freaking dog. And I realized, I don't know that that's a dog, but I'm thinking still too big for a wolf. This thing put on the brakes because there's no way. This rabbit is now under one of the outbuildings and it's going to crash into the freaking thing. So all of a sudden it stopped. It spun around and I'm not moving. I'm like, I can't record it as a research.
And you're inside at this time.
I'm in the house the whole
Yeah.
time, right? So I'm looking and I'm sitting there and I just put everything back in the sink and I just sat there and I'm real, of course, again, if something happens, it's always in the phones in the other room. But anyway, so I'm sitting there and I'm going, don't move because there were no curtains. It's a large picture window. And as soon as I moved, it booked it. But so I'm watching it. It spins around, looks at the house, looks back the other way, gets up onto its haunches for a moment. It sat there for a few seconds. I'm going, there's no freaking way that is a dog. And I've never seen a wolf growing up doing that. Doesn't mean that there isn't one out there. The coy wolves out there are smaller and they're, like I said, real mangy looking. And I've never seen wolves in our area, not ever. So I looked at this thing and I'll show you, I found a simulation of something pretty close. It's just a simulation though, so probably AI. But as soon as I moved, it spun around, dropped back down. So it did run. It's not like it ran off on 2 feet. So I showed this. I messaged some of my researcher friends. I'm like, okay, Wayne came over and I was like, you need to just go out there and look at those prints and tell me what you think.
Yeah.
So he took pictures, and I'll show pictures. And again, it's in the snow, so it's not like, how clear a picture. These are the pictures that I sent off to friends of ours, to see if they had any ideas, like people who are researchers and who research, cryptid stuff. So I don't know, but it's a big enough print, and I guess some dog prints could be big, but that's Wayne's hand, and Wayne's a big guy, six foot
Yeah.
two. It's a big hand. I have a small hand against Wayne's. It's like, right. So
Yeah.
because I looked, I'm like, screw that. I always want to know how big that is. So that was one of the prints, and I'll see. Let me grab another picture here because I thought I left it up. 1 second. Okay, I think it only lets me put up a few pictures at a time. So I'm just looking for, no, not that one. There's a group of pictures. Okay. This is just a picture from when the thing was spun about. So again, picture Wayne's hand in there, and that's so, and the picture doesn't do it justice. I think if his hand was in there, you get a better idea
Yeah.
of the size of this thing. But I just sent it off to some researcher friends, and what they seem to think um, was that it could have been a direwolf. I'm like, they've been extinct forever, and the chance of having a direwolf in my freaking backyard is
Yeah.
probably slim to none. But the fact is let me get the simulation picture. If I can
But
bring
like
it
you
up.
and I were mentioning before we hit record was, I'm not convinced that the dire wolf is extinct.
Yeah, I'm starting to wonder. Here's a simulation, okay? And you guys can remember, like, I'm still on my journey of research with this. I'm not saying one way or another this is what it is. I'm still trying to figure this out. And we've since sold the house. Like, the house is gone now. And so I don't know. But I could just tell you that, I mean, we've had things hovering over the house at night, UFOs. We've had, like, I mean, I've seen all kinds of stuff out there. I've heard all kinds of stuff out there. This is a first for me. So this is a simulation. I can say I downloaded it the same way I found it, dire wolf simulation. Because my first thought was that a big Malamute? Because that has to be a big, crazy Malamute. I've had Malamutes. They can
Mhm.
be up about 100 pounds, but their paws are maybe the palm of your hand.
Yep.
I know this because I've had them, and I played with them, and
Yeah.
so I don't know, like, if this is what it is, but it didn't
Just
get
look
up and walk away. It trotted off, loped away, kind of.
because look at like I mentioned earlier, look at from the shoulder down. It's just so massive. I know this is a simulation, but if
Hmm.
this is like and you said it's very similar to what you witnessed. I mean, look at
Yes,
the size of that.
I know. I was just like, I was shocked at the size of it. And again, seeing, timber walls, which are very high up, but they're still pretty lanky, and seeing regular wolves, which are smaller and stockier.
Mhm.
I don't know. Like I said, I'm still on my journey trying to sort this out because I've never seen anything like it. You have to understand, I was there like almost 30 years
Mhm.
on this property. It was a pretty big estate. Like, it had, a couple of acres. So there was a lot of room. It was surrounded by ravine with one road that goes along the side. There's a lot of room for it to run. And because there was so many sightings in the area, we had one street that was over from us. But I mean, we're probably talking a couple kilometers because, it was very spaced out to the next street, which was where they have UFO lookout, magnetic hill. Anybody who knows Burlington will know where it is.
There's a
Um,
magnetic hill in Ontario?
yes.
Oh, there's one in Moncton, in my home
Yes.
province, yeah.
Yes,
Wow, I didn't know
exactly.
that.
Yes, yeah, the
Hmm.
magnetic hill on King Road, and, there was all ravine. Behind the businesses on the service road, there was
Mhm.
all ravine. So there's all ravine up in that area. It's they're starting to develop it now, and approvals are taking place, which is why I got out of Dodge. I didn't wanna be around any of that,
Mhm.
so I left it in 2019 and sold it in, like, 2021. So still had access to the house after it just went through major renovation, and then it went. But in all these years and decades of being there, I've never seen anything. So I'm thinking, why am I sitting here having this crazy experience with something that I've never seen before, never seen since?
Yep.
So anybody has any ideas, aside from a dog, because I know I've explored that one, and and I have a being in this field for the last couple of decades. I know a lot of people who
Mhm.
research a lot of different things, and that's one of them. Dogman and dire wolves, things like that. So I've gotten some pretty good opinions, and they found the photos interesting as well, basically because of the fact that it's just like pretty much untouched, like nobody walks around back there.
Yep.
So it was an interesting experience. If it was, I'm just like, you know what, that's actually pretty cool. But as I started exploring more and more, I realized that areas of the city that were going further east, like really nice, like it was one really upscale community, in the middle of the day, they saw what reported to be a very large type wolf get up and stand up and walk away. Now, that's not near a ravine. It is not near the lake. I mean, it would be one heck of a stretch to get there. Whereas we have a lot of ravine between at the house that was up to Lake Ontario. They could have done it, right? They could have done it, but I can't see this community. So there was a lot. So moving on to another area near Brantford, Ontario, is a small town called Burford. Burford, there were a family I was working with for a total other cause, but it's also very close to Indigenous land.
Mhm.
Like it butted up against Indigenous land. And the story that I got was one night the son was alone, the family was gone, and he was out there just taking care of the dog. He was visiting, he didn't live at the house anymore. So he went in with he and his girlfriend were just having a fire in the back, and they're just like, we're hearing stuff in the background, like drums, and didn't think anything of it. But they started to feel uneasy. And she's like, you know what? I'm just gonna head out. I don't really feel comfortable here. He's like, okay, okay. He goes in the house, and then he's like, okay, I'm just gonna go out and take the dog out for his last bit of business before we call it a night.
Mhm.
The dog's not having it. The dog is just like resisting. Guy's pulling the leash. Come on, man, let's go, right? And the
Yep.
dog's like, I'm no bloody way am I going out there? So he turns around and he looks back and he looks up and he sees something large standing there again with red eyes and what looked like a snout. Because I hauled off, grabbed this dog, okay, which is like this big crazy wiener dog, so they're not small. Grabbed the dog, went into the house, slammed the door, locked it. This thing came, smacked the door. He goes, I could hear it sniffing the top of the door frame.
Oh.
And I'm just like, see, right there, that's weird. But yet, in that same week, there were UFOs spotted. They were calling into the police department. A week later, there were reports of grays in somebody's barn. Like this, it was a week from just a sheer craziness, right? But out there, there's a
Crazy
lot
town.
of land. Huh?
Crazy town.
Crazy. Oh, yeah, in a good way, maybe, but except for the wolf part, maybe. But yeah, it was crazy. But there's so much land out there and protected Indigenous land that there's a lot of room to hide.
Yep.
So I'm like, I've got to try to see if there's anything else out there. I need more information. Well, I found an article of this 16-year-old guy. He was in the northern US, and he said he was alone at home. And he got really concerned because for something like all night, he saw these what looked like tall dogs walking around, and they would jump down and they would run and they would stand up because they circled his house all night. And I'm just like, okay. So we know there's definitely, I mean, there's obviously things going out there.
Yep.
And I mean, some places, report that they've got all kinds of sightings. Like the Beast of Bray Road, in Wisconsin, they're just like, no, we've never had, I don't think there have ever been any attacks with that. I'm just like, gosh sakes, but, so then you're into Quebec, which is like the heart of a lot of these werewolf aka the Loup Garou
I just want to mention
sightings.
something first. Um,
Yes.
so about 15 years ago, myself and a team member, we went to interview this couple in Quebec.
Mhm.
They were having paranormal activity in their house and on their property. So you go in and you do the initial
Mhm.
interview,
Yes.
and and she's doing all the talking, and her husband, he's a very quiet man, he's kind and everything, but there's just something about him. And then she says, "Oh yeah, he's one of the mountain men of the Loup Garou family." And I'm like, "Excuse me?" And she says, "Yeah, him and his clan, they're Loup Garou up in the mountains back here." And I'm looking at him, and I never had a chance to ask him any more questions than that, because we're there talking about the investigation we're going to potentially be doing, and I don't remember the woman's name because I wanted to go back and get more information on that. So
Mhm.
I didn't even know that there was supposedly a family of Loup Garou living in the Quebec mountains.
And yeah, and you're sitting here looking for that one, like
Yeah.
so it is crazy when you think about it. So, that just tells me that okay, so this guy turns obviously or gives the illusion or, but a lot of these people would have been curious to find out about their family history. Did they
Mhm.
come right from France? Because allegedly, France in the 1400s were fighting. They had what was called a werewolf epidemic
I
since
didn't
the
even know that.
1400s.
Yeah,
I
until
know.
you mentioned it to me. That's amazing.
Oh, it's all there. It's
Yep.
crazy. It is. It's crazy. So, it's believed that a lot of them brought their fears with them and their belief systems. And the thing that makes things turn is they must have brought some back with them, or they may have been somewhere along the line
Yep.
because they plagued Quebec. The ones that plagued Quebec though seem to be different than the ones like their European counterparts. So just changed on the full moons. These guys would change every night. But even though most of them, I did not know this. Okay, when I researched this, most of them turned into wolves. There were others who would turn into dogs, cats, owls, cows, oxen, and there were some that were pigs. And there,
Really?
I've heard about the reports of pigs before. And it kind of makes me wonder, them changing over to cats and stuff like a little familiar. I'm thinking, God, it's a little familiar. So
Yeah.
maybe there's some something to all of that. But in 1767, the local paper, which was called the Gazette, published a report of a werewolf that had been spotted the previous summer outside the stone walls of the city. And that's a whole weird story in itself that I wish we would have to have more time to get into, because that
Yeah.
story in itself um, is big. Like there's so much about it that it shapes a lot of what comes out of that area as per origins, within that province. So there are stories that go from the East Coast to the West Coast, north to south. There's so many stories. It isn't just, Bigfoot. It really is. There really is so much more to it. And a lot of them, Indigenous tales, goes back again to settling around the Great Lakes as well. So they do exist here.
Mhm.
So I'll share with you. I had a friend specifically ask me about the story of the land between the lakes, which is in
Yep.
Kentucky, Tennessee areas. But people have been brutally murdered there. I mean, brutally murdered. So the Shawnee people often spoke about shape-shifting shaman who would come into form of monstrous creatures, Ojibwe. Their folklore was pretty much the same thing, beings that walk the line between man and animal sort of thing. But there were, again, other type of creatures as well. But here is primarily Dogman, Bigfoot, and hybrids called the Googway.
Haven't heard that one.
Yep. And
Hmm.
apparently there's a war. There's been warring. Dogman and Bigfoot have warred, and the Dogman went to the south, Bigfoot went to the north. And if I got that right, brain. But over time, people started noticing this hybrid type, they were carrying smaller, looked like a cross between them, which I can't figure out. Just saying, it's like
A cross between Dogman and Bigfoot?
apparently called a Googway. So I don't know. Maybe
Hmm.
supernatural creatures could do things that are different than we common folk. I don't know,
Yeah.
but anyway, they were very aggressive. Bigfoot up there are known as face eaters, and they were said to be at war. And so, oh, sorry, Dogman in the north, Bigfoot were in the southern regions,
Okay.
but there was a lot to a point where they cleared the area. So they turned the town, this whole area, into a national park, the guise of a natural park. They said they hauled people out. So people went out in droves, and other people came in and just started camping there. And
Mhm.
this is where a lot of you know the murders started happening. But I mean, settlers have been in this area since the early 1700s, and they've always reported seeing shadowy figures. But so did the indigenous. So there are lights that dance around over the lake, which is pretty normal, right? And people have seen hearing other sorts of sounds, and there have been occasional craft sighting, shadows all the time, but mangled bodies that were torn apart to a point where they could tell it wasn't from a natural predator, that it was just so violent and vicious. There are cases of a family that were there, and you're talking this little boy, and because somebody witnessed this and lived and saw this dog man holding a young boy, and
Oh.
just like, oh, it was terrible. I didn't want to be graphic about it, but you guys could look up. There's a lot of stuff on this. You can look it up. And the father came over, saw this guy was just hunting out there, and he grabbed his gun and fired off at this thing, and he dropped the kid. He obviously killed the father, and then he went in and just tore the windows right out of the motorhome and went after the wife and the little girl. And the buddy
Mm.
just got under the trailer. He's just like, what the heck? But he survived to tell what happened. So, you're looking at that. You're seeing that a lot of people are essentially, I mean, there have been many deaths in this area, to the point where it's obviously got a lot of attention. But people have reported seeing the military with a very large, super sturdy cage pulling out a dog man. So there's believed that maybe there's studies going on, or who knows, right? Would mass producing? I don't know. Who knows? There's a lot of stories floating
Yeah.
around, and I'm not an expert in this. I'm sharing with you guys part of my journey into the research of this, because I do have a lot of people, especially having a radio show as well. People are like, can we do
Mhm.
something on this? And can you get some stories? So I like to research, and I like to learn about the content. It's something that's always fascinated me, but it's also something that's, there's just so much to learn, that until I had the time to do it. And then I started recalling all of the stuff. I'm like, pretty sure I've seen stuff like this. Not,
Yeah.
the massive destruction. But I'm gonna show you some pictures. And again, these are just, a few pictures that we've got along the way. Um, I'll
While
try
you,
this.
while you bring those up, have you ever visited LBL?
No, I have not.
Hmm.
Would you want to? They're hostile over there,
I know.
man.
I have
They're
friends who
hostile.
go there. I have friends in the South who have, shows, and they go, to Land Between the Lakes all the time looking for Bigfoot. And,
Right.
they are aware of the dogman that's there as well, and they take
Mhm.
precautions, but
Yeah, just stay in the South. That's where you'll get Bigfoot. But the Bigfoot are hostile. They're very, very aggressive. I mean, you call them face eaters. And mind you, a lot of cases, if you look at the Dyatlov expedition in Russia,
mm,
the faces were the first thing to get. They believe they found what they call the snowman. There's a whole lot around that too. That's a whole other show. But it's hard to say what is what. But I wanted to share some pictures just because, get some insight into what you guys think it is. So here's one. This is on a trail cam. Okay, there we go. This is taken on a trail cam. Let's see if I have the trail cam. The trail cam was in Tennessee, so it would not be super far, I don't think, from this. And again, it's really hard to see when you're looking at stuff
yeah,
like this. I'll see if I can enlarge it a little bit. If you enlarge it, sometimes it just
it just
makes it
gets
look. But
pixelated.
you see, there's the ears right there.
Okay, yeah.
See, there's the face right here, and here's the ears. That's apparently what the trail cam captured. I always look out for pareidolia stuff because
Yeah.
you have to really look at this, but it looks like it's looking dead on. There's the nose, there's the eyes, and here's the ears.
Hmm.
See? So again, if I bring it much closer, so you see, there's the face right here,
Yeah.
right there.
Wow.
And it looks like it's looking at you. There's the ears again. So I don't know. You know,
Yeah, it's very hard to tell.
it is. I see it once I saw it, I went, now I see it perfectly, but I had to definitely have a good look at it. So, okay, so here's a couple of other pictures. 1 second. All right, so let's go with this other one. And this one here is South America, I believe. At a playground, a wolf was playing with a playground set.
Oh, wow.
So I know, like, I mean, you look at this thing, you know, it's something that's out of there. But when you look at, this is basically, I took the screenshots of the
Mhm.
video, but when you see it and you see the way this thing moves and the way its legs are, I'm thinking that's like, that's pretty crazy. I think that one is in Brazil. No, that one's not in Brazil. This one is in, hold on. Let me get the swing. Uh,
Now, part of me wants to see this, and the other part of me is like, heck no.
oh man, you know, I'm the same because of the fact that, they're so aggressive. But yet some
Yeah.
people said, I mean, I'm sure it depends maybe it depends on the type that we're actually dealing with. I don't know.
It's kinda
Um,
like Bigfoot. Some of them are said to be extremely aggressive, and others are there to help people, so
mhm.
who can say?
And
Wow.
and I think you get to a point where you have to ask yourself as well. Let me see if I can make that a little bit sometimes easier to see, but you kind of see it's hunched up like this and it's got very, like thick legs.
Yeah, and I can see where the head is and yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. Again, very interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting. I think you do have to ask yourself, okay, what are we really up against? I got a couple more here. Where's two and there's one. Okay, go over here. This one's from Brazil, and they've not debunked this one. They've not really debunked it, so it makes it a curiosity for sure. So this is the area we're looking at right over here.
Mhm.
It walked in behind an outbuilding, and there it is. Can you see it? The ears right here,
Okay, yeah.
and there's the white face right here. That's big, and they've
Hmm.
not debunked it. From anything that I have read, they've not debunked it. I'll see if I can get another picture of it as well.
Is this the one where I think it was, uh, some, politician in Brazil actually said they saw it, and it made the news. Was that I think it was Brazil.
It might be. I've seen this hit. Like, look how big it stands up a little bit more here. Again,
Mhm.
you have the ears. You have, but again, remember this comes off a film clip, and it's
Yeah.
a short film clip. So I'm trying to because I wanted to sort of share it, and it's definitely something that you leaves you thinking, okay, they're definitely out there, and there's so much. I mean, there's so much information. It's like you just don't know how much to share and how much, you know, you can only write so much of it down. You can only take so much of it in.
Yep.
It's a lot of real similar stories. We had a guest on last night, Eric Mantel, who talked about the experiences at the Beast of Bray Road.
Oh,
And apparently there've been no attacks there, but a lot of people, even to this day, still see him. He goes, we went out there because honestly, because we were feeling things like literally behind us, like they're quick. But the Port Robinson one is the one that really gets me, because I mean, this thing, like I said, was pacing the car. It's kind of like, all right, that's interesting, and then took a swipe at it. So it's like
that's terrifying.
it's terrifying because what if they weren't in the car? What if they were,
Mhm.
But there's stories all over the place. and again, ghost lights, everything, all in and around the same area. And we had friends who lived in Port Robinson, and he said, honestly, he goes, the stories about this thing, yet no one is really documenting it because I struggled to find info on it. But,
And if you can't find the information,
I know I'm pretty good at digging. It doesn't mean it's not out there.
yeah.
But, Wayne knew this girl because he had a business rapport with her for,
Mhm.
going in and getting supplies and stuff like that. And should be no reason. And she just came up and she's just like, oh, this is my experience here. Because I know this is the sort of thing as I want to share it with you. And he's like, okay. He came back and was like, yeah, God, only the story I just got. And I
Wow.
said, but again, it sounds like it's something very different than the typical, because a lot of communities will call it wolves that walk upright, right? So this is something that's pretty common in some of the communities up here,
Mm,
not just Loup Garou, that's the French side of everything, but a lot of the indigenous people named it that as well.
mhm.
Of course, they have their indigenous names for it, but it's just like, it's crazy. There's just things out there that you don't think about, and you have to maybe start thinking about it. Are we squeezing them out as
Yep.
well? It's Burlington. It wasn't where I was. We were in West Burlington,
Mhm.
where we were. I mean, it was a nice West community, and there was botanical gardens there that owned like acres and acres and acres of just untouched stuff.
Hmm.
Right.
I
So,
wanna ask your opinion on something. So I had a gentleman tell me he was supposed to be on the show, and then I just lost touch with him, but he's, ex-military. He's been overseas, and
mhm,
he says that he has I don't remember if he actually saw this or if he heard stories from his friends, but he says all of a sudden there'd be a flash, like a blue flash, and these things that kinda look like Anubis standing there.
mhm,
Um, you know, um, and
mhm,
he says that he had heard that they were brought over to the States to be studied, and then a lot of them escaped and just wreaked havoc in the United States. And now, apparently, the American government will bring them back overseas, but they will not bring them into the States again because
mhm.
of that one incident when they escaped.
Mm.
Have you ever heard of that, or what do you think that would be?
Yeah, I did find some stuff on how some of these dogmen looked exactly like Anubis,
Yeah,
which is the Greek god
Egy-
Anubis, the
Egyptian.
dog, Egyptian. I'm okay. Been a
You were
day.
testing
Been a
me.
day. Yeah, yeah. We'll go with that. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. The Egyptian god Anubis. So there are descriptions that match that. So if they did bring them over, for sure. I really have to wonder if we're looking at quantum beings as well, where they're using portals,
Mhm.
because a lot of people, and this is something that my guest Eric Mattel was saying last night, he goes, balls of light are in and around the same areas and shadows. This is the same sort of thing we're hearing with Bigfoot. And there's a strong belief that they are a quantum thing, that they do use portals. It would explain why they're so quick, zipping in and out. But again, it's another theory, but it's a deep theory. Like there's many different things. Like are they extraterrestrial beings, a different race?
Mhm.
You're looking at some of going into the old war, because I spent time in Romania. It's fascinating to me, the the lore of the people, when they'll tell you stories. And it was interesting to hear the one in Brasov. It's kind of like, okay, okay. And then you have, the haunted forest in Romania, which is said to be like to have some kind of a portal. It's under a no-fly zone. Why? I found out after the fact. Thank you for that.
Oh,
But
really?
yeah,
Oh,
because I'm thinking there's planes, but they were way off, and I'm like,
yeah.
okay. And things go disappearing in there. It's like Romania's Bermuda Triangle. Um, and I kept hearing, I mean, it's silent. You get into some of these places, this place was silent. There's no birds. There's no wildlife running around. Not that they weren't. That's just within the circle coming into that
Well,
part
that
of
is
the
odd because
forest.
there's always some kind of sound from a forest.
Something. And
Yeah.
maybe further back, because they do have, they do have wolves and stuff like that in the air, bears, and Romania is known for it. It's one
Mhm.
of it's one of these these countries in Europe that was fully forested. Up until the time we were there, a Canadian company was starting to forest it, and they were getting a lot of backlash for it. And I think King Charles at the time came through and tried to fight for the importance of remaining forests. But this specific area, there was nothing, but there was this droning sound. Well, where the hell did that come from? If it's not a portal or something underground, like a base, it was like a humming.
Was that a constant humming?
Oh yeah,
Wow.
frequency just makes you cuckoo. But
Yeah.
there was definitely something to it, and those people see UFOs over there. They see balls of light. There's something that's very aggressive up there. People get kind of chucked around, scratched, get that feeling of heaviness. Typical stuff that could be associated just with frequency, though, and with energy. That the being nauseous. And I'm just like, we never experienced any of that. I didn't feel anxiety. I had a nap when I went in there, just lie down and just start trying to get a feel for what's around me.
Yeah.
But our experiences were unbelievable. So there's definitely something to it. And if things are coming back from the old world, what are they? I mean, they has a strong belief in vampires there. Same with Poland and Germany. Why not wolves? Why not the wolves? They're all in these there. The Black Forest, like out Germany. Yeah, there's stuff in there. Wolves again.
Yeah, it's always with the wolves.
They seem to be the big ones. Mind you, you wouldn't suspect a little pig running around or a big boar or whatever.
Yep.
I don't know.
Fascinating.
People are changing into little familiars and such. So.
I work with a lady who's originally from Germany. She's been here in Canada for many, many, many years, but she still has that thick German accent. I'll have to ask her if she knows anything.
Yeah, what do you know? Do you have any folklore? Because it's all out there. So, if you have a healthy belief or fear of vampires as these supernatural beings, and the wolves are well known out there for a lot of that throughout the Germanic the countries. So I don't know, man. It's just sharing a little bit of research and a little bit of insight at this point. Like I'm just early days with it. I don't delve a lot into cryptozoology because I just get into so many other things. But I have found it fascinating because it seems that I've lived very close to these areas. When I started researching, going, that's on the other side of just our property thing. There's stuff there, and realizing I moved into another area also has a lot of it. So how
now,
many
is it
of us
the
are within
area
these
or
areas?
Is it the area or are they following you?
Oh, things follow me all the time, but I really hope not. I really hope in this case it's not a thing.
Distance.
Yeah, I'm hoping not. I'm good with ghosts and stuff for one thing. ETs are another thing, but getting into that sort of thing, I think I'd be a little nervous. I won't lie. Yeah, it's a bit wiggy.
Wow.
I know, but it was fun.
Well, thank you so very much, Michelle, for sharing with us your research. I really appreciate it. Definitely have to have you come on, talk more about it. It's such a fascinating. I've been fascinated with Loup Garou. I have to admit it, since I was a little girl watching Scooby-Doo.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. And then because I was a curious little girl, I kind of looked into it and I'm like, oh, wow, So
there's so much you don't realize, Kat, until you start delving into it. Like it is truly a rabbit hole. I mean, there are researchers who have done phenomenal work who put themselves, I feel, in danger getting out there and looking at some of this stuff. But there's so much information, and thanks to them, it's making things easier for me. So I can all my experiences and things that have been told to me firsthand, I could say, yes, this is what, part of my journey, but a lot of stuff out there is just research from other people. So look it up. There's some great stuff out there.
There is, definitely. Well, before we sign off, I'm sure the listeners know where to find you, but could you let them know where they can find you?
MichelleDesrochers.com is the best place. Check us out Wednesday and Thursday nights, 9 p.m. Eastern on the Outer Realm Radio. We have fellow host Laura Lee Potvin and Carolyn Shellhorn coming on next Wednesday. And we have Ed Odell. Everybody loves the hitman. Ed Odell, he's coming on Thursday night. So it's going to be a laid back evening of spooky tales and experiences, or the whole week is going to be like that. So check us out.
It is spooky season.
It is spooky season.
Yes. Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Good night.
Chat soon. Bye. So thank you so much to my special guest tonight and UPRN 107.7 New Orleans. And remember, if you enjoyed the show, please like, share, and subscribe. And to be a guest on the show, or you just want to say hello, drop me an email at paranormalheart13@gmail.com. Much love to you all. Until next time, take care.